Program Administration.
You can go ahead. Oh no, is everybody stuck?
Want to have your intern introduce herself and the rest of the folks introduce themselves?
You're addressing me,
Yes.
Lorraine? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We have two Erics on the call. So,
Sorry.
No, that's all right. We both spell our name the same way, our first names. But yes, thank you, Lorraine, very much. Christy, thank you for working with my office to get this coordinated. You know, I do have breakfast food over here to the left, because this is normally a breakfast meeting, and so you may see me take a little bite of something while we're in the process. But yeah, let me introduce the folks that are on the call. Representative Harrison from the 69th District, which represents Southbury, Roxbury, Bridgewater, and Washington, is on, and Representative Paletta from the 68th District, which represents Watertown and a little piece of Woodbury, is on. Clearly, the three of us, and then I'll get to Lena in just a moment, so the three of us understand and appreciate what your organization does, not only across the world and across our great nation, but right here in Greater Waterbury. I hear, and I know that my colleagues, Cindy and Joe, hear all the time from our constituents, their families, whatnot, of the wonderful services that you're providing, that quite honestly, and Lorraine, you and I have talked about this for a lot. If you weren't providing them, they wouldn't exist. These services wouldn't exist. So we are eternally grateful for what you do for the residents of our towns and the people that we represent. And I thank you for that. So let me just now also introduce Lena Neary. Lena is a sophomore at Northwest Community College, and is we have the longest running legislative internship program in the country. It is in its 52nd year. Lena is, I think, the third or fourth intern that I've had in the 8 years that I've been in Hartford. But I'd like to give her, with your indulgence, Lorraine, a couple minutes just to let her tell us a little bit about herself, what her career plans are. You're going to be like, wow, you're kidding, right? But go ahead. So if that's okay, Lorraine, if we could have Lena, Miss Neary, introduce herself.
Hi, so I'm Lena Neary. As he said, I go to Northwestern Connecticut Community College. I chose community college because I didn't know what I wanted to do going out of high school. So I was like, let me save some money while I'm figuring it out. I'm a liberal arts and sciences major right now, but I'm getting ready to transfer. I'll be graduating in May. So when I transfer, I plan on being a political science major, and then eventually I plan on going to law school for criminal law.
Great.
Now, isn't that wonderful to hear a young person that has doesn't want to have student debt, did community college, which was great for those first couple of years, and moving on to and graduating with her associate's degree in a few months already. So Lena, thanks for being here. And this is part of what we talked about in terms of so you can see what we do as legislators. So with that, Lorraine, I'll turn it back to you. If any of our other colleagues jump on, we can just have them introduce themselves.
Okay. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Christy, you want to put up the presentation? Okay. So again, thank you for being here. We know you're very busy getting ready for the session. Most of you are familiar with Easterseals. You know that we provide state-supported services that are essential for adults and children. And you've attended some of these legislative roundtables before, so we do want to thank you for your support. We're going to jump right into the challenges that we are currently facing. So as I said, you're very familiar with us as a provider of state-supported services, particularly for the developmentally and intellectually disabled adults. You know that we have services in Danbury and in Watertown and across Greater Waterbury for that. And you also know that historically, for years and years and years, those services have been underfunded. And we are grateful for the work that the legislature did last year to give a moderate increase to those services. We're grateful for that, but we need you to understand that that really is the beginning of the ask, and that there is a continued need as we move forward. We also want to point out today, we are going to spend the majority of our time talking about another branch of services that we provide, which is early care and education, which does not come under the human service umbrella. So I think that's the important thing that that we want to bring forth today. We'll get into that a little bit. So not only have we been historically underfunded for the services, but we are now approaching year 3 of the COVID-19 pandemic. I do not need to tell you how devastating that has been for the entire state, and in particular, our industry. We are in one of the worst workforce crises that we have been in since, I've been in healthcare and the nonprofit world for 40 years. I've never seen the crisis in terms of hiring and retaining staff that I have seen over the last year or two. Obviously, you're very well aware of inflation, and there doesn't seem to be any end in sight for that. So not only do we not have enough people to do the work, but the cost of us doing business in general has just gone through the roof. You know, our occupancy costs, our utilities, our legal fees, our just every single expense that we have has gone through the roof. And coupled with that is that the need for our services just continues to increase. Okay. The other thing I do just want to point out here is that as a nonprofit provider of services, we're not like the grocery store. We're not like the gas station. We can't raise our prices. We get a fixed payment from the state that we just have to take. We are not, we're not in the business of being able to adjust our prices for inflation. Okay, next slide, Christy. Okay, so just a few things. COVID for us has not let up. When I did this slide, we had over 75 positive cases of COVID amongst our employees. We're only an organization of 200 employees. So I did this slide a couple of weeks ago. It's now over 90. That has gone back. Since Christmas, we've had at least 10 employees out each week because they've either been positive or exposed. Our employees are exhausted, they are stressed, they are overworked, and most importantly, they are leaving us for better paying jobs. Yesterday, I have to say, in the paper, there was this wonderful announcement about this new project on the Waterbury-Naugatuck line. It's going to bring 1,000 jobs to our area. And I thought to myself, how great for Greater Waterbury that we're getting this fantastic project at the industrial park. But then I thought to myself, holy cow, those 1,000 jobs are going to compete with the 40 openings that we have here. And it's going to make it even harder for the human service organization to bring in qualified individuals. I do want to point out that our leaders, many of whom are on this call, they're having to work as classroom teachers in our children's academies. They're having to provide in-home care for some of our intellectually disabled individuals. They're providing direct care on a daily basis. And so when you pull your leaders into those roles, that leaves a lot of unmet needs for the organization. And the reason why that's happening is because people are out sick, positions aren't filled, and the like. We cannot fill critical positions, which means we have individuals and families that are not being served. So direct service providers. We have not had nursing services at our location in Watertown for over a year. We cannot contract with a nurse to provide those services. Therapists. Eric oversees our rehab center in Meriden. We can't find a physical therapist to save our life. And of course, teachers in our children's academies and children's center, they are very, very difficult to come by. Okay, so enough about our challenges. Let's just talk about, so at the beginning, I mentioned that you all are very familiar with us as being a provider of services for the Department of Developmental Services. The focus today really is the services that we provide through the Office of Early Childhood. Now, last year, when the legislature gave a slight 4% increase to providers of human services, that did not include any services provided under the Office of Early Childhood. And about 40% or 50% of the work that we do here at Easterseals is funded through the Office of Early Childhood. We are a provider of school readiness education and infant and toddler care at 4 different locations in Waterbury and Meriden. And as you all know, childcare is in an incredible level of crisis. It's essential to the overall state economy to provide an environment that's safe for the children and reliable so that parents and family members can go to work. It's really important, and I know that you all know this, that child care and early care and education is an economic issue and it's a public good issue. Early on in the pandemic, Easterseals was one of the first child care centers that opened up in April of 2020. We closed down for a few weeks, and then in April of 2020, when we didn't know what was going on with COVID, we opened up to provide childcare for essential workers. And we have remained open that entire time since April of 2020. Okay, Christy.
Oh, Lorraine, I just want to jump in. Senator Hartley has just joined. Welcome.
Oh, excellent.
Thank
Good
you.
morning, Senator Hartley. Perfect timing. Now, we are talking about childcare and its essentialness. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is that we are a provider of school readiness. So that is a state-funded program through the Office of Early Childhood. It's a pre-kindergarten program to prepare children for school success. It's curriculum-based. It requires that we are accredited nationally. And it requires that our teachers are, Christy, that are credentialed professionals. These are not daycare providers. These are teachers. These are teachers that need to have bachelor's degrees. And as we know, early learning and care is just essential in today's world so that people can return to work. Okay. Okay. So this is a busy slide, but I really do think that it's important, and I am going to have Cindy jump in on the last bullet. We are paid $743.66 per child per month from the Office of Early Childhood. The last increase from the state was well over 5 years ago. So for 5 years, we've received this. Okay. When you break that down to the number of hours that we are open during the week, because we're required to be open for 10 to 11 hours a day, that's reimbursed just over $3 per hour per child. And school readiness was intended to be a tiered payment system. So I want Cindy to unmute and kind of describe what that means.
Yes, good morning. So to piggyback on the last increase that was received for school readiness, I did go back and find that it was in 2015. So it's been about 7 years at this point. The financial structure or the revenue structure for school readiness, the intention was to have a 3-tiered system so that we would be receiving per child a monthly reimbursement for services provided. We would also be receiving Care for Kids reimbursement, and that would be based on parent eligibility. And the third would be parent fees. Over the years, that payment structure has shifted dramatically. Less parents are in the workforce, which means that they are not eligible for Care for Kids. Therefore, we are not receiving that level of funding. It also impacts an incentive that we have through Care for Kids for being an accredited program. And that depends solely on the number of students that are eligible for Care for Kids. The other thing, because parents are not working or working at lower paying jobs, we have families who are paying much less in family fees. So the minimum family fee is $10 a week. So anyone walking through the door is going to be responsible to pay $10 a week for up to 50 hours of care. So when you add the $743, 66 per month, and you add the $40 per month that parents are paying, that is under $800 for a child who is not qualified for Care for Kids. And I can say that the last cost of care that was done in the Waterbury area is several years old. The cost of care was established at $288 a week. So even if we take old numbers, we see that that reimbursement plus the family fee is just not even coming close to the cost of care. And currently, we are unable, based on our workforce challenges, to even provide the number of provide services for the number of spaces that we are licensed for. Currently, combined with our infant, toddler, and school readiness programs, we are unable to enroll 120 children. And for us here in the Waterbury area, where we do provide at 2 of our programs, infant and toddler care, not to have the teachers to be able to provide that infant toddler care is really detrimental. We are one of the very few programs that are serving children 6 weeks of age and through the toddler years.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So like you can see on this slide, $743 per child per month, about $3 per hour per child. So I just want to show you sort of like what that has to cover on the next slide. Okay, so one teacher can work with 10 children. That's the ratio, 1 to 10 in school readiness. And so if you multiply that $3 an hour by 10 children, you get about, 33, 38. And this is what it needs to cover. And this is at a minimum. It needs to cover our hourly wages for our teachers, which includes benefits. And as I had mentioned, our accreditation requires a bachelor's degree. So think about what a bachelor's level teacher would make in a school system. We have to maintain our buildings safe, our property for our students. We have utilities, safety, security, property maintenance, all the technology that we need, classroom supplies, anything to mitigate COVID, which is a lot. Remember, these children cannot be vaccinated. And so, this puts the environment at a higher risk for our teachers and our children. And just overall general operations. This does not account for things like the new HVAC system that we need at the Children's Center, which is going to cost us about $240,000 over the next year. And it doesn't help us to sort of save any kind of dollars, because every penny that we bring in and more is spent just in general operations. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So, this is our ask. You've heard our ask before. I do feel that I need to once again, thank the legislature for the help that they gave to the human service providers, Easterseals being one of the many last year. We do feel that needs to continue in this year's legislature, to continue to look at what the human service providers needs. But I also ask that you take a look at the services that are provided under the Office of Early Childhood, because that is not considered a human service organization. And so that was not given the increase last year. We know that we've been underfunded. We haven't had any rate increases, as Cindy said, since 2015. And, you know, this final bullet is really, really important. And if you will indulge me, I do want to send you a link to an NPR article that came out last night regarding, I don't know if any of you saw it, but just saying that for childcare workers and early educators, this pandemic has just put them at the newest low that they can possibly be. And 78% of workers are have identified low wages as the main challenges, and 81% say it's the reason why they are leaving the field. And that is really sad for someone like Cindy and Gail, who have been in this profession for over 30 years and who are outstanding in the work that they do and leading their teachers. You know, having these challenges is just getting to a point where it is, you know, beyond difficult. People say that it's a crisis, but I would say more like it's a catastrophe. Okay, next slide. So we are asking for increased funding for early care and education. And the second bullet here, which every time I bring it up, I know legislators are surprised, but last year in the human service world, legislation was passed that if an organization had any savings at the end of their contract year, they could retain that, if you recall, right? We fought long and hard for that. Well, that did not apply to the Office of Early Childhood. So if by some chance, at the end of a year, we end up with any slight savings, we still have to either spend that down or pass it back to the state. And so that is another, that's another critical point here. And, you know, we do want to talk about the fact that, you know, we are talking about school readiness here, but, you know, there is a mixed delivery of systems in the state of Connecticut. We are center-based, but there are also home-based centers, and there are family child care providers. So it's a wide spectrum of care across the board in the state of Connecticut. So I thank you for listening to us, to our ask. And I do want to open it up and see if you have any questions that our staff can answer.
So Lorraine, I would like to defer immediately to Senator Hartley. She has not had a chance to say good morning, and the senator sits on a couple of committees of cognizance with respect to or what we're talking about here. You know, and we probably should have included when we did our intros. You know, I know you already know that I serve as the ranking on human services, which is an integral part of this. But I'll defer to my good friend Joan Hartley. So good morning, Senator.
Hi, good morning, Eric and Lorraine and Cindy and the whole team. Look, you are very familiar to us. I have long supported and followed your work and cheered you on when you actually moved over to the Waterbury Hospital site. In fact, I was just with Justin Lumby, you know, and we had, you know, a very complimentary conversation about that. Yeah, listen, you know, this is, how shall I say it, a cold bucket of water on a cold day to see this, but it's not new information. I guess I just want to say, so the 4%, you were not included in it because it didn't reach early childhood.
Correct.
So it was all the not-for-profits, really.
So it was the not-for-profits that provide human services under the Department of Developmental Services, DEMIS, the DOC, those types of programs. And so, you know, a lot of times when Easterseals talks to you, it is about those contracts that we have. But we felt like today we really needed to shift our energy towards this level, and it's not something that you're used to hearing from us.
No. And so then the human services bump applied on those strands and those lines of,
Yes.
yeah, because I was confused by that.
Okay.
Yeah. So and Beth Bai is, you know, she's a real champion on this. So as an organization, I'm sure you're having these conversations, and can anybody just tell me about, you know, what's happening on that front here and now?
with the commissioner.
Yes.
Yeah, Cindy, do you have any comments on that?
Sure. So, good morning, Senator Hartley. So we take advantage of every opportunity to speak to the commissioner. I and Lorraine and some of my other team joined the Monday weekly meetings that are sponsored by the Alliance of the Middlesex Coalition for Children. And we've had many opportunities to hear how she is supporting our efforts. And she is definitely a champion for early care and early education. And we appreciate that. Right now, the push has been, and for several weeks now, we're talking about the federal funds, the Build Back Better. And so the focus has been on how those dollars could possibly be spent should that legislation get passed and that come into Connecticut. The focus being on operations, the focus of a lot of conversations have been on overall operations and the workforce shortage. So she understands firsthand what we're dealing with on the statewide level, of course, and understands that there are families underserved, communities underserved, and certainly thanks us as much as she can for the work, for the effort, for the tireless effort of the teachers to keep our children in programs and to serve families. So I do believe that she hears what we're saying. She makes herself available at the coalition, at the alliance meetings, and depending on what she hears there, I'm sure she's taking that information up the chain.
Yeah. Okay. But Cindy, I don't hear any conversation about, a plan or an initiative. So let me go back to, the Build Back Better. Okay. So we don't have that, on the ground at this point, but there was ARPA, there was CRF. And then Lorraine talked about, you guys, went live immediately, and we had the designations of, essential workers in terms of getting into the childcare settings. You didn't get any of those tranches?
Yes.
So I will talk to you a little bit about the ARPA dollars. So Easterseals, the Office of Early Childhood did receive ARPA dollars that they put on the ground relatively quickly. We were able to apply for a portion of those. We were able to get some of those dollars, and we had to commit to how we were going to spend those dollars, which are time specific. So we got some dollars, but they have to be spent within 18 months of getting those dollars. We chose to do some moderate salary increases, and also to do some sign-on bonuses, which we have not spent a lot of money on because we're not getting folks to come, and also to do some retention bonuses for those individuals, for those employees who have been with us for years. What I will tell you is that we would have liked to have used all of that money to increase everyone's salary. But after conversations with our board of directors, who has fiduciary responsibility over our organization and are a bunch of smart people, it was recommended that we couldn't do that because at the end of 2023, in July 1, those money goes away. And so then we hit this financial cliff that we are now responsible for. And so, when I say that we were able to give some moderate increases, that is sort of kind of what we're hoping that we can now make up for in increased school readiness funding, because we won't be able to pay that after 2023. And we may have to bring people back, which is not going to help us in any way, shape, or form. So
bring people back. Yeah, you're trying to bring.
No,
right?
I mean, bring people back to an original salary, because we won't have the dollars to pay for it once those ARPA funds run out.
Yeah, no, that's a conversation we're having every day on this.
Yeah.
Honestly, we recognize it. Okay, well, I just, wanted to make sure that, because that was my understanding. I, had conversations with Jim O'Rourke and those folks as we were going through this. So then there was this other comment that kind of confused me. So at the end of the year, you either have to spend down or you have to return. How often does that happen? You have anything at the end of the year?
Very infrequently, very infrequently. It rarely happens in our Waterbury Center. Sometimes in our Meriden Center, we might end up with a little bit of a surplus, but it would have to be returned if that was the case. And so it doesn't give you an opportunity to, if at the end of the year, you had $3,000, doesn't give you the opportunity to put that into a savings or a project of any sort. So,
Yeah.
and
And what's the commissioner, what's the department's position on that? You've had those conversations, I'm assuming.
actually, I have written for that, for some,
Flexibility,
I'm sorry?
flexibility and.
For some flexibility, and it's sort of like there's sort of, I would say, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, Cindy, but I would say there's sort of this lack of knowledge at the state level that actually occurs. Remember, as a school readiness provider, we're actually a sub-grantee from the cities. And so it's the cities that are sort of telling us, this. So I don't know that they fully, I would hate to say that they don't fully understand it, but when I've asked, it's sort of been a, really? Kind of an answer. And we haven't really gotten a full explanation on that. Would you agree with that, Cindy?
Yes, I agree, Lorraine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so back in the day, when we first stood up the early childhood program, and we put together the School Readiness Council, and Waterbury was one of those communities that had probably a handful. It was probably just Easterseals, early childhood slots. We were like flatlined. The part of that structure was that you had a student in a slot, and then they stayed for 2 months, 3 months, and they left, and the slots weren't filled, that you had to give that money back. And I remember going through budgetary cycles where we were trying for the Waterbury School Readiness Council to work around that and not lose that money, not have to send it back to the state, from the Readiness Council by, getting other kids in other slots, or moving some of the slot money to other providers. And so that's what we're talking about. Like when you have a kid who, leaves and the slot isn't filled, or you have slots that you have identified and were being reimbursed for, but they haven't been filled. Is that what we're talking about?
I don't think so. Cindy?
No, I understand what Senator Hartley is saying. However, the slots, pre-COVID, our slot allocation would only be received if we provided service for that number of children in that particular month. So we've never been given money up front. We've never been told, well, you qualify for 270 slots. Here's your money, and then pay it back if in fact you don't fill the slots. We are reimbursed on a service basis. So every month we would receive a different allocation based on the slot utilization.
And so you talk about that you providers for the city. So, but it's really not the city. They're working under the auspices of the program from the state.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So this is obviously, a real priority issue. The 4% bump that, you only had on the human services side isn't, of any help. And then of course, when we did that, even with the not-for-profits, the problem was, you might remember there was a labor issue. And so, remember Lorraine? And
Yeah.
so as a result, the money that was, supposed to be for the human services sector, not-for-profit, got funneled off into that situation.
Yeah.
So what did you finally end up getting on the human services side after we had that labor negotiation issue?
So, well, it's funny that you should mention that. So on the DDS side of things, we were given money and told that we had to raise salaries to $16.50 an hour. So that's what we got, just enough to make those salaries. But what that did, I know you've heard this before, but what was not included is anything that would have brought salaries closer together into some kind of compression. So folks who were making $16 an hour or $15.50 got raised up to $16.50, but we couldn't do that with everybody. And so we have inequities in and amongst our system for people who have been here for 25 years are making very similar to someone who's brand new working. So we did get that. I will tell you an interesting little story is that we also have a very small contract with the Department of Rehab Services, DOORS. We provide hearing services for individuals who need to get a hearing aid that are under that service. We also provide driver assessment for that department. We got a letter this week saying that we had been approved for this 4% increase last July 1, and we hadn't gotten it yet. So now it's January, and we had not gotten that 4% increase. So you can be expecting a check from us for the services you've provided from July 1 to now. And it was minimal. It was like a $1,500 check because the amount of services we're provided for them is about $40,000 since last June. And then on the second page of the letter, there was an attestation that said that in order to receive the money, we had to sign off that we were giving everyone a 4% raise with $1,500. With $1,500. So it was sort of one of those across the board kind of letters, I'm sure. And we will be contacting DOORS about that, but obviously we can't give every audiologist and every therapist who works under those contracts a 4% raise on $1,500. But that was sort of the assumption that was made. So that was just an interesting thing. It just happened this week.
No, so it's, one thing after another here.
Yeah.
I have to just excuse myself for a minute.
Yep.
I've got some boiler issues, and that's why I was late this morning. I have the service man here just to talk to him for a minute.
No worries.
So I'll pick up, Joan, and go take. You got to keep the house warm. It's like 0 degrees out there. So
yeah.
So Lorraine, I just have a couple of questions, and then I want to give my colleagues in the House an opportunity to chime in as well if they might have a question or two. So, and I know that we have an hour scheduled. If we need to set up other meetings to come and learn more from you about this, we'll do that. So this may sound like a loaded question, and it's not, but where did the workforce that you lost as a result of COVID, right? Is because you did start out by saying that you have unfilled positions now. Where did they go? Where are they? Do we know?
We don't necessarily know for sure. We have about a 17% vacancy rate. We have 39 to 40 positions open. I don't know, Cindy, maybe you can answer from your childcare positions if people have gone to other childcare jobs or other areas.
Sure. So pre-COVID, our industry was already at a deficit in the workforce.
I remember that discussion. Yeah.
Yes, and we were already many NAEYC, which is our National Accreditation Association, and other local professional education groups were already trying to figure out like what is happening. And something that was determined was that, and this is going back probably 4 or 5 years, was that less folks were going into the field. The enrollment at the universities was way down for early childhood education and child development and child studies. So we already had a deficit. We see the workforce, our workforce is aging, and I'm going to say that because I'm that person. And I keep my fingers crossed that our workforce does not, who can all qualify to retire, not all, but that they don't decide to retire in a big old lump sum, because we are those folks, you know, and we have not seen young folks going into this field and coming in. So we were already at a deficit pre-COVID. And then when you couple that with how we now are doing daily operations, we are cohorting, which means that there's very little flexibility for scheduling staff and how staff move throughout the day. We do not combine children in classrooms that are arriving in the morning. So we have to have all of our staff scheduled to work so that it's same children, same staff, same classroom all day long. That is a response to COVID, and that has kept us, that's one measure that's kept our children and staff safe. So there are those challenges, but the workforce challenge was something that was already, we were feeling the effects of that pre-COVID. We have had some folks not return to work. It's a very, very small amount.
Okay.
It's more on how we have to do business every day.
Yeah, okay. So let me just address that, just some initial thoughts. So, you know, there is as we come into, God help us, what might be the beginning of the third year of this, right? In March, it'll be the 2-year anniversary, right? So of this pandemic. You know, there's a very, very heightened awareness and level of concern within the legislature from all 4 caucuses regarding workforce development and getting people properly trained, you know, trying to identify workers while they're in, you know, high school to point them towards certain careers. You know, not everyone has to go to college. We have great manufacturing base here in Connecticut. You know, the largest secondary and tertiary aerospace manufacturing sector in the nation, right, is on the Housatonic River Valley and the Connecticut River Valley and all that, right? And then getting people into careers like the ones that you offer, okay? So I think that I know there will be a big focus on that and various plans that will circulate in the next couple of weeks, and then who knows what comes out of the meat grinder at the end of the session, because it's always, and I hate this expression, but it's always, you know, kind of making the sausage, right? We have to figure out what's going to work, but there is a level of awareness to it. But what I also heard you say, and this is the harder part, as Maureen, you and I have talked about this for all the time that I've been in the legislature, and I'm going back for my 8th year, right? So we don't properly fund your ability to give in this very strange working environment we're in right now with an increased minimum wage, young people going to restaurants and saying, I'm not working for $14 an hour, you got to pay me 20, you know, and I want paid time off as a part-time waiter or waitress, right? So I think we have to address that, you know, that's kind of at the root of this, that if you know, in your example about 1650 and the wage compression, I've heard that once, I've heard it 1,000 times in the last 2 years. Okay, so that's very real. And then of course, the issue is always for this legislative body with the executive branch to figure out how do we do what we know is the right thing to do without increasing taxes, without cutting services somewhere else. You know, there's only, theoretically, there should be a bucket of money, and we don't want to have to spoil the balance of that. And in all the time that I've been up there, and most of the time that Joan has been there, which is a lot longer than I have, you know, we always go back to the well and try to dig out more dollars because we have issues with how we spend and budget at the state level. So I don't think anyone on this call is deaf to your plea for help, that you have to now pay even more competitive wages. Amazon's probably going to come in when they open that facility and start at $18 or $19 an hour for someone who might be defined as a warehouse, you know, a warehouse technician, I think is what they call them now. So a job that I would have had in college as a warehouse worker, you know, where you're pulling stuff, you're stocking shelves, whatever. But $40,000 a year to work in a warehouse, where you're trying to provide something that's requires a higher level of talent and expertise and training because of what the service you're providing, and you can't match that. So you're not going to get, and Amazon will have better benefits than you offer at the end of the day. So I get it. And I'm not on labor. I don't know if anyone else on the call, any of my legislative colleagues are on labor. Joe, I know you used to be, but so we understand that. I just don't know. Maybe it's CARES, ARP money, but the cliff, where we know all about budgeting cliffs in the legislature. We create those every year. They're dangerous. The ones that we will create with $10 billion worth of ARP money in 2 years, we will not be able to see the bottom on those. It's really terrifying as a fiscal conservative for me to even think about that. But we live in the world of today in Connecticut, so we have to try and figure it out. And of course, to add to that, the politics of all this, it's an election year. So maybe we're more motivated. Maybe some people are, I don't know. But I guess my point in this ramble is that I'm sympathetic. I understand. I just honestly, I personally don't know what the solution is. It has to be collaborative with both sides, with both political parties, if you will. But we have to help you, is the bottom line. We do. We rely on your services. I opened with that. We rely on what you're doing. If you don't provide some of what you do in our community, it wouldn't exist. And that's really not, that's kind of a precarious spot for us all to be in. So let me stop talking. I know Cindy and Joe are just frothing at the bit to say something right here. So I'm going to defer to them and see what word pearls of wisdom they want to add to this conversation.
Thank you, Eric. I just wanted to say good morning to everybody. I've been listening here, and it's an honor to represent Watertown and Oakville. In my new district, I will actually have part of Waterbury, so that should be definitely interesting and adds a new dynamic as well to my time here in the legislature. So I know that Easterseals is a wonderful organization, does a lot of work with the city of Waterbury. I speak very frequently with Kathy Awad, the head of the Northwest Workforce Development Group, and she has been on me for a long time about supporting, work for folks that, may not go to college and need a place to go and need specific training and a skill set. So I'm all for that. But I just want to touch very briefly. I know a lot of this has been said, but I think it's important to note that due to COVID and, in the 6 years that I've been in Hartford, I don't think I've ever heard of or seen anything like what we've seen in the last 2 years. The staffing shortage is number one, and it's your industry, but it's also the hospitality industry. You hear of restaurant workers that have left the job, or they're demanding, $25 an hour for dishwashing or things like that would otherwise have paid minimum wage in years past. I think part of that is because a lot of people have either found other work or they're simply not rejoining the workforce. So we have that issue that hopefully will be tackled. Also, the funding issue. With the cost of living rising all over, you don't have to really look further than the gas pump as to how much, we've seen an increase in the last year. And, we can talk about politics another time, but I think it's important to know that this is real. I was speaking with the owner of Barabalt the other day, and, she had told me basically that, there's a lot of folks that, they heat the homes with propane, and it's like they've seen the price go up 40%. So I'm assuming that, Easterseals obviously is not immune to that. They're seeing increases all over the place. And then again, it goes back to what Senator Berthel said, which is, where do we get the money? So my plea to you, I'll end with this, is and I always tell folks that this legislative session, we need you to be active in the public hearings up in Hartford. I don't know if the building's going to be open, but I know that there's an option on Zoom. We're doing it now. So we need to have your voices heard both in the public hearing and with both sides of the aisle, because, at the end of the day, to use an analogy, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Sometimes, the folks that are up there and the most persistent end up being victorious in that bucket of money that needs to be disseminated. So if we don't hear from people, and I'm not saying we don't hear from you, but sometimes it's overlooked. And you have done a great job. I know usually we have this in person, but You've done a great job at explaining your wants, but I guess my recommendation to you this year would be to come to Hartford or participate and get as many people as you can to sign up and testify about how important your organization is and how much it means to the folks that you service. And if you lose funding or, even stay stagnant, what that could mean for the community. And I'm happy to loop in, folks from the Waterbury delegation. I know Senator Hartley's on the call, but also, the representatives on both sides of the aisle that are in the House with me. And we should put a joint effort together to make sure that this doesn't go unnoticed, because it's very easy to just say, okay, I need this much money. I'm hoping it gets put in the budget, and then walk away and not do anything. And then we all forget about it the last couple of weeks of session when we're voting on hundreds of bills. But if we can get this kind of on the horizon sooner than later, I think it could make a difference and make it a bipartisan approach. So I'm all ears. If you ever need me, can obviously call me on my cell. I give out my personal cell to everybody, and I'm happy to meet in person as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be very squeaky, we promise.
So I guess it's my turn. I think Joe, Representative Paletta, has said it sort of succinctly. The wage compression issue is no surprise. Anybody who understands economics knew that this was coming. I also think none of us clearly understand what's going on with the workforce. I read every day that people have reevaluated their lives and they're just leaving the workforce. You're not, it's going to be a long time before we can replace those workers at the level you need, because people still want the services. So it's a complicated issue. Certainly money, something that we can do in the budget is going to help. But boy, it's gonna be a tough road before we get to the other side of this, I think. So anything we can do to help, anything that, I'm happy to also be included, discussions in meetings that you think it will be good for us to assist with. I'm here.
I can't thank you all enough for being here. Go ahead.
So, well, thank you, Lorraine. And I think maybe Joan has been pulled away, which is okay. So listen, I said this a moment ago. I know we're coming up on the hour, and we all have the rest of the day to get to as well. But clearly, we're open to additional meetings. I live a couple of miles from the Watertown facility. It's easy to get down there for a meeting, what have you, and we can be safe if we want to actually be in the same room and make sure we don't hurt anyone. But before we adjourn, I think it's public knowledge that someone might not be on this call next year in her current capacity. And Lorraine, I know you have made an announcement about your retirement. And when I approached you on that the last time I saw you in person, you saw how angry I was about that and disappointed and upset. But I just want to be on record here of saying that we have a debt of gratitude to you for what you've done in running the Greater Waterbury Easterseals that we can never truly repay. You have taken the agency to unprecedented levels of success, not only because of your intelligence in being a good CEO, but because of who you are as a person, your personality, and your willingness to really just be there and be real and be involved in this community. And I say part of that from a very personal experience with a family member, and you jumped in and made it right when you had a million other things that you were doing that day. So we're really going to miss you. Whoever your successor is has some incredibly large shoes to fill. I hope that person is as committed and as dedicated to you. So thank you. Thank you very much for what you've done. We're going to miss you. I hope that we'll see you as a volunteer on some boards and in other ways where you can give back. And then when you're done, you just say, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. But thank you very much on behalf of all of us and the community. We appreciate what you've done, and we're going to miss you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will be here till the end of the legislative session, however.
Oh, good.
So like I said, I will be squeaky. We all will be squeaky.
Good. Squeak
And,
on.
Yeah, yeah. So
right,
thank you.
so-
I appreciate that.
My pleasure. All right. So are we done?
I think so. Thank
All
you
right.
all again for joining us. Lena, I hope that was a good experience for you. I hope you got some further education. We're also available to you if you have any other questions. You can reach out to Christy, and we'll get you maybe on a tour or something, or we'll hopefully see you up at the Capitol. So,
Excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this was great. I liked listening and just being able to hear it was a great experience.
great. Thanks.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Enjoy your day.
everyone.
Stay warm.
Thank you, everyone.